What's up, everybody? Welcome to MPC Fights. This is my brand new fight channel. I've been uploading fight content for about the last 8 months to my channel, MPC Sports and Gaming, and it's always been a significant part of that channel. But I figured I'd finally start a breakaway channel just for my fight content after all this time, mainly just because I make so much fight content, and I think that it deserves its own channel. We're going to do a lot of cool stuff on this channel. And this is now going to be the main home for all of my fight previews and predictions and my fight review videos, including all of my MMA and boxing previews and predictions. And we're going to do some exciting stuff in Boxing Manager, which I played on the other channel, the video game, and the Sports Manager game, and as well as some stuff in Undisputed and Fight Night Champion, and maybe even EA Sports UFC. So stay tuned for all that stuff. That's going to be coming up. But let's get to UFC 324. Pimblett versus Gaethje, Gaethje versus Pimblett. And I'm going to start with the main event because the main event of this card is really the one that steals the show and steals most of my attention and has taken up most of my thoughts in the last couple weeks here, at least in the time that I spend thinking about MMA. Because I don't know if Paddy Pimblett can win this one. This seems like Paddy Pimblett has been impressing people for a while now, and this may be a step too far. I think of Gaethje as being a smaller man, but I think in reality he just has the smaller reach. He doesn't have the long arms that Pimblett does. But I picture Paddy Pimblett winning this because of a mix of his youth and his speed, the way that he's won all of his recent fights, the way that he was able to overwhelm Bobby Green and Michael Chandler, the way that he was able to beat up Tony Ferguson. But Justin Gaethje, and even an older Justin Gaethje, I feel is a different animal and a different level of striker. And I think, a little too much is being made of Justin Gaethje being over the hill. Justin Gaethje still has a lot left to offer. And his recent losses shouldn't indicate anything too concerning because, they're to Max Holloway, Charles Oliveira, Khabib. This is a real level determining fight for a lot of people and for people that are really in the know about MMA for Paddy Pimblett. I think that Paddy Pimblett, this is the real test where we know Paddy Pimblett is entertaining. We know that he's explosive. We know that he's unconventional. We know that he's very skilled. It's you have to admit that he's very skilled at this point. A lot of people hate on him because he doesn't quite have that technicality that you look for. But I actually do see a potential, championship level talent there, albeit with the caveat of, you always have to worry about, Dagestani wrestlers and pressure wrestlers. And I don't know if Paddy Pimblett could necessarily keep up with a guy like that. But if we're talking about strikers and we're talking about, regular mixed martial artists who aren't, 2-3 years Dagestan, yeah, Paddy Pimblett can stand with pretty much anybody that isn't just going to try to wrestle him for 25 minutes. And this fight is for an interim lightweight title, and I think it's fitting that this is Paddy Pimblett's first ever title fight, and it's the hardest fight of his career. I think it's a reasonable path up to a title for Paddy Pimblett, and I think anybody that sort of cries about him being an industry plant in the same way people cry about Sean O'Malley, I think is frankly just kind of hating. I think Paddy Pimblett is a significant talent, earned his stripes a little bit more than Sean O'Malley in that Sean O'Malley seemed to be, sort of spotted out and picked out by Dana White before he was even in the UFC. And Paddy Pimblett had to earn his way on the regional scene in the UFC and in Cage Warriors. And I think that's a little different to Sean O'Malley. Not that Sean O'Malley didn't fight in the regional scene, but not for nearly as long. Paddy Pimblett, you could argue that his record is a little padded. He's definitely got a more padded. His 23-3 is more padded than Gaethje's 26-5 is. Gaethje's 26-5 is pretty loaded. I mean, there's some padding in there like with any fighter, but it's pretty loaded, and his losses are exceptional. Not the case for Paddy Pimblett. He's lost to 3 people I've never heard of, although that was when he was growing and growing into his talent as a fighter, his emerging talent as a fighter. But it also speaks to the lack of technicality that he probably had back then that he still carries now. Justin Gaethje has another level of technicality over Paddy Pimblett. That is to say, people can be frustrated. This is my first fight on a new channel, and I'm just not going to make a pick. And people can be as mad as they want about that. I'm going to pick the rest of the fights on the card. I honestly can't pick this one, guys, especially because we haven't seen Paddy in a full 5-rounder before. And we have seen Justin. And the problem is Paddy is so much younger. And in my opinion, the potential for explosiveness on Paddy is so much higher, right? Gaethje has great hands. I think that there's a better chance that Paddy can eat Justin's best shots than that Justin can eat Paddy's best shots. I think Paddy maybe can't sleep Justin, but he can KO him. And I think Gaethje's going to have definitely a harder time KOing Paddy, just due to Paddy's size, his arm length, and again, his speed, youth, explosiveness, and he just loves to fight, right? both these guys love to fight, but Paddy has this sort of youthful exuberance and excitedness that he brings to everything, and incredible and endearing, especially given the fact that Paddy Pimblett is so big for the weight classes that he always fights in. He always looks like a light heavyweight to me, as I said when I found out that he was supposedly going to fight Ilia Topuria, and I'm glad that he's not fighting Ilia Topuria because this is a less dangerous fight than Ilia Topuria. I thought he was going to lose to Ilia, of course, but they didn't exactly line him up an easy one with Gaethje. They gave him a pretty big step up that I think a lot of people are underestimating. And I would honestly say, even though I'm not picking it, that I would say this is probably a 55-45 for Gaethje. I'm not even going to look at the odds. I don't really care about the odds. But I think that Gaethje has fought a lot of explosive strikers before. He's fought a lot of, lengthy guys like Paddy before. And I think he's not going to have as much of a problem with Paddy as maybe some other guys have had. But Paddy can still beat up on, honestly, I think on natural lightweights like Justin Gaethje. I think that there's a good chance that if Paddy has the stamina for this fight and is really ready for a 5-round fight, that he can do significant damage to Gaethje over the course of the fight, and that over the course of the fight, Gaethje can have a harder and harder time getting in. But it's up to Paddy to have that stamina and be ready to go 5 rounds for this fight, because he needs to win the championship rounds to be able to win this fight. And if Gaethje is getting inside easily, and especially if he's getting to the body and hurting Paddy to the body with those leg kicks, with those jabs, even with those hooks to the liver, it's gonna be a tough night and a long night for Paddy. So yeah, I've got this 55-45 Gaethje. So I guess you could call that picking Gaethje, but officially I've got no pick in this, and I'm excited to see who wins this, and I'm excited to see what happens next in the lightweight division. It'll definitely. I mean, we're waiting for Ilia to get back. This is basically to line up Ilia Topuria's next opponent. And again, I just think I'm sure I'll make more content about this here on the channel, but I think that Gaethje is just a slightly better matchup for Ilia than Paddy Pimblett. At least right now, although, it's not uncommon for a 37-year-old fighter to age overnight. So let's go into the co-main event here with Sean O'Malley and Song Yadong. And after Acosta versus Lewis, we'll go up the undercard. I think that's how I'll do this one. And I feel like they're trying to give O'Malley kind of an easy win here. Again, it's another example of a little bit of favorable matchmaking for Sean O'Malley, but I think they're wrong. I think Song Yadong is going to give a better fight to Sean O'Malley, even if he is a little bit undersized. But most bantamweights are undersized compared to Sean O'Malley. It's part of why the UFC loves Sean O'Malley so much. It's not just the tattoos and the colorful hair. It's the fact that he's a really, really tall bantamweight, and that just makes him projectable. He's got a 72-inch reach and 135 pounds, and he's a switch hitter. He's shown some real improvements to the takedown defense. I think Song Yadong is going to successfully have to take down Sean O'Malley in this fight to beat him, and I'm very confident that Sean O'Malley is going to be able to stop him from doing that. But it's up to Sean O'Malley here, because Song Yadong is going to show up to fight, and he's going to do the work, going to follow his game plan. And if Sean O'Malley isn't all there, and he isn't ready, and he isn't motivated for this fight, if he's gotten ready to fighting at the championship level, or even if he's maybe tired of making that, wants to move up and is getting closer to moving up, I don't know. It could be a period in Sean O'Malley's career when it's been pretty well established with these losses to Merab where he stands in the bantamweight division, unfortunately. And I don't really know what a victory over Song Yadong does for him here to reestablish himself in people's eyes. He'd have to do something extraordinary. And I think if he pushes to do something extraordinary and Song Yadong sticks to the game plan, that's exactly what Song Yadong wants to happen. That being said, I am going to pick Sean O'Malley. It's hard for me not to pick Sean O'Malley. I think Sean O'Malley is a better striker than Song Yadong, and I haven't actually seen anything in the lead up to this fight in the UFC embedded or in the interviews to imply that Sean O'Malley is really looking past this fight. I mean, of course he wants to be the champion again. He wants to be back in the championship conversation. But that isn't looking past Song Yadong necessarily. That doesn't tell me that Sean O'Malley is going to drift from the game plan, which I think is, again, what he would have to do to lose this fight. He would have to drift from the game plan. So as long as Sean O'Malley trusts his striking, stays in the zone and fights smart, I think he can handle Song Yadong. So I'm going to pick Sean O'Malley, but don't be surprised if Sean O'Malley's getting memed on after this one. It would definitely have to be a different kind of defeat than the one against Merab. And just, I'm not really a Sean O'Malley defender because he hasn't really proven himself yet to me in that way, and I think to most UFC fans. But I respect his talent. I hated the second Merab fight. he got so badly outclassed in that first fight. I get that he was the champ coming in, but he got so badly outclassed by Merab that I think that it didn't deserve a rematch. I think that Sean O'Malley, needed to just take a different career look. It made me almost wish that the UFC was more like boxing and there was some other belt or some other, fight that Sean O'Malley could go pursue. I really didn't like the second fight. I thought it was pointless. And it ended up being pointless from the point of Sean O'Malley. How much would Sean O'Malley like to just be sitting here 18-1 or 20-1, taking 2 fights against 2 losers? I mean, that's why it's a good thing that there's only 1 belt per weight class in the UFC, because Sean O'Malley can't take some, second-rate championship and sit on it like they do in boxing. But I digress. That's not the point. I think if Sean O'Malley doesn't come mentally undone, he gets it done. So I'm picking Sean O'Malley in this fight over Song Yadong. And Waldo Cortes-Acosta versus Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis. I would love to pick a Derek Lewis in this fight. And, of course, that you can't make a Derek Lewis fight without that caveat of saying he's got a chance. He's got a chance to sleep this guy in round 1, because Derek Lewis always does. But unfortunately, Waldo Cortes-Acosta is also that kind of fighter. And, he is 34, but, he's younger. I'd bet he's probably faster. And the truth is, I think Waldo Cortes-Acosta might have better. And I think Waldo Cortes-Acosta has better hands than Derek Lewis. I think Derek Lewis has heavier hands and can have heavier hands. But I think Waldo Cortes-Acosta has faster and slightly better hands than Derek Lewis. It's going to be a great heavyweight fight. I think this is one of the very few truly great heavyweight fights that they can make in the UFC heavyweight division right now. And it speaks to the lower quality of the division right now in the John Jones, Tom Aspinall era, or whatever era we're in of the heavyweight division, with, Cyril Gahn fighting for a title and honestly actually outclassing Tom in the 1 round of the heavyweight title fight. Again, the heavyweight division just not in the best place right now. But this fight really does have title repercussions. If Cortes-Acosta, sleeps Derek Lewis, it's not that impressive because of the amount of losses Derek Lewis has had. But Derek Lewis is coming off back-to-back wins, the last being a big upset over Tyson Teixeira, who is an even younger, taller, and more exciting heavyweight to a lot of people than Waldo Cortes-Acosta. But I think Waldo Cortes-Acosta is a much more unique heavyweight than Teixeira. I think Waldo Cortes-Acosta has a chance to become one of the most significant fighters from the Dominican Republic in the history of mixed martial arts, especially. And that 5.5 significant strikes to 2.5 is not great looking for Derek Lewis, especially given that Cortes-Acosta is coming off back-to-back first-round KOs. I think that Derek Lewis, he's never been known for speed, and he is definitely hittable. And I think that Waldo Cortes-Acosta is definitely the likelier fighter to land that big shot first in this fight. So I'm picking Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Honestly, if you want to place a bet, I would bet on a first-round KO for either guy in this fight, although the odds might not be that great, because to be real, that's pretty likely. I think these guys are going to try to knock each other out in the first round, and that's why this fight got made. And the UFC loves putting on fights like that, and it's actually pretty rare that you get a fight like this with a 40-year-old heavyweight, honestly kind of journeyman, in Derek Lewis. Though it's hard to be a quote-unquote journeyman when you're just in the UFC. How are you really a journeyman? You just have a journeyman-like record. You're not really a journeyman. But I digress. You've got a 40-year-old, with a 29-12 record, fighting, engaging in what's absolutely going to be a first-round slugfest, probably knockout, firefight type of heavyweight exchange with real future heavyweight title implications. This is really a pretty cool fight, and I like that it's this high up the card. Okay, now like I said, we're going to go down to the bottom of the card and review the rest of the card from the bottom. And this isn't a good matchup here, Josh Hokit versus Denzel Freeman. Denzel Freeman only has 1 loss, and he's a pretty good striker. He's a southpaw. But Hokit is on a really good run of just sleeping dudes right now in the first round. And I don't know how many UFC fights he has, but that 12.8 takedown average is absolutely crazy. So I'm going to pick Josh Hokit. I don't think that he gets that he loses his O here, even though it is a heavyweight exchange. Freeman's a southpaw. You could always hit him from a tricky angle, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think Hokit wins this one. And you got Alex Hernandez versus Michael Johnson, and Michael Johnson is a win-loss fighter, and he's on a 3-fight winning streak, and you can owe that to whatever you want to. The fact that he's trained at such a high level for such a long time, being a member of the UFC, having access to UFC training facilities. and him just having a really high ring IQ from fighting in the UFC for a really long time in a loaded division like lightweight, and inherently having a loaded resume, even despite having 19 losses. But Alexander Hernandez is a step up from the guys Michael Johnson has been fighting previously. His last 3 fights being against Darius Flowers, Otman Azaitar, and Daniel Zellhuber. And Zellhuber is a talented fighter, but Hernandez, I think, is on another level from any guy like that, from any of those guys. And he himself being on a win streak, I don't think that's going to come to an end here for Alexander Hernandez against Michael Johnson. This is this is a fight that I kind of criticized the UFC for, and that it's a bit obvious who the UFC is putting in here to win and who the UFC is putting in here to lose. Although that's been the case with Michael Johnson fights in the past, and he's up the apple cart, but that's just the way of MMA. Alex Perez versus Charles Johnson, and this fight is interesting because it's a flyweight bout, and they're both tall. Johnson is especially tall for a flyweight. Johnson also a more athletic fighter despite being 2 years older. Perez has the ground advantage, so this is a tough fight to call. But I'm actually going to pick Johnson here in a 3-round fight, especially if he can manage to control Perez's ground game. Perez is going to have to close the distance somehow. And if Johnson can land any kind of damaging shots while Perez gets in and tries to close the distance here, especially consistently, if Johnson can find those shots, he'll win the fight. So this is going to be a close fight, but I'm going to pick Charles Johnson. And Krylov versus Bukauskas. And Krylov, to me, is the scarier fighter, at least in terms of their actual game, their actual skill set in the ring, especially when you combine the striking with the takedowns. Krylov has a really nice mixed game, especially for a light heavyweight. But he's been knocked out in the first round 2 fights in a row, and I think the chin has just been cracked from Krylov, even as much as he tries to mix his game up. Bukauskas is on a winning streak. And it's another switch stance fighter fighting an orthodox fighter. But I believe that Bukauskas is going to be the much larger looking there, despite only having a half-inch reach advantage. It'll be really interesting to see because I'm not sure Bukauskas has the punch power of a Reyes or a Guskov, who are the last 2 guys who KO1'd Krylov. It's a lot more likely to me to just be a matter of Krylov's chin being cracked. So I'm going to pick Modestas Bukauskas in this fight. And here comes another KO1 for Atiba Gautier. It's a bit of a tougher fight in a lanky, tricky Russian and Andre Pulyaev here. But Gautier is on a streak of KO1s. I'm pretty sure going back at least 4 fights. His last fight was against a last-minute replacement, Vines, who he completely blew away. I remember that I didn't actually get the right preview for that fight. I previewed him against his original opponent, not against Vines, but I would have picked a KO1 either way. And to be honest, I'm probably going to pick a KO1 here because this guy is honestly a machine, Atiba Gautier. I'm not sure who he even lost to, and I don't really care because it wasn't recent and it probably wasn't even in the UFC. All this guy's recent fights, last 5 fights have all ended inside the first 2 rounds. 4 of those 5 have been inside the first round. 81 reach at middleweight. I'm picking Atiba Gautier fairly easily here. If Andre Pulyaev pulls this off, I think he will become a very much more known commodity. But Gautier is on his way up, and I would not be surprised to see Gautier get a title shot at this point in the next, I mean, who knows, 5 years. I'd not imagine, but by the time this guy's 30, he better have got a title shot at middleweight if he even turns out to be close to what he's looked like so far. Umar versus Figueiredo, and somebody missed weight for this fight. This fight is going to be at a catch weight of 138.5 instead of the bantamweight limit of 135 like it was supposed to. Yeah, so it was Figueiredo who missed weight, not Umar. Which, doesn't bode well for the fight for Figueiredo, but I don't think there's a lot of people picking Figueiredo in this fight anyway. It is underrated how Figueiredo has performed recently. Petr Yan is the current bantamweight champion of the world. That's not too bad of a fight. He got a knee injury against Sandhagen. Then losses to, 2 losses to Brandon Moreno. And that's it since before the pandemic. Victories over Moreno as well. He's fought Moreno 3 times, fought him thrice in a row. A trilogy against Moreno. There between 2021 and 2023, where he lost 2 of 3. But he beats Rob Font. He beats an old and admittedly probably washed Cody Garbrandt in 2024. Beats Marlon Vera as well, and then beats Montel Jackson. They're not bad wins, but nothing there tells me that he can stop Umar, that he can, limit Umar's aggressive wrestling attack one bit. And so far, I mean, the key to beating Umar has been be Merab Dvalishvili, and Davison Figueiredo is not Merab Dvalishvili. He can't stop Umar Nurmagomedov in the same way that Merab Dvalishvili did. He can't do the things that Merab Dvalishvili did to stop Umar Nurmagomedov, and on top of the fact that Figueiredo didn't even make weight for this. So I think Umar is going to just completely stifle and smother Figueiredo, and I think we've seen this show before. I don't think a 38-year-old guy who missed weight is going to beat Umar. That's a bit of a stretch to me. And Arnold Allen versus Gene Silva, and this is one of the best fights on the card. Probably my second favorite fight on the card, to be honest with you. A really important featherweight match for establishing contenders in this division right now. I'm definitely picking Arnold Allen in this fight. His level of competition is a little higher than Silva's, even though Silva is the guy who choked out Bryce Mitchell to the delight of many. He followed that up by getting KO'd by Diego Lopez. Arnold Allen may have lost 2 or 3, but the losses are to Mosfar Evelev, but the losses are to Max Holloway and Mosfar Evelev, so you can't really say too much about that. He comes back with a win over Giga Chikadze. At UFC 304, but unfortunately he didn't fight at all last year, Arnold Allen. It's a little bit low on the volume, whereas Gene Silva is a little bit lower on the actual level of competition relative to Allen. But I also think Allen has the technical advantage in addition to having the size advantage and in addition to having a southpaw advantage. So for me, there's a lot for Gene Silva to overcome, even though Gene Silva's a pretty crazy dude. He's a very forward-moving, very aggressive fighter who always likes to pile on the pressure. But I think Arnold Allen can, if he wants to, really just counter Gene Silva to pieces and really make Gene Silva over the course of the fight regret that forward-moving pressure and that forward-moving attitude. I think you could see a very exhausted and, beat up Gene Silva in round 3. I think that it's ultimately going to be a case with a more technical and older fighter and even a southpaw fighter, that a longer break may actually be a benefit here for Arnold Allen and not a bad thing, especially against a fighter like Gene Silva, who isn't necessarily somebody who's going to overwhelm him in terms of size. I think coming back from a break can be a little bit more of a detriment when you're fighting somebody who has physical advantages over you, and that isn't the case here in this Arnold Allen versus Gene Silva fight. Arnold Allen is definitely a much bigger featherweight than Gene Silva, so again, I'm going to pick Arnold Allen. And Natalia Silva versus Rose Namajunas, and I don't think Thug Rose is quite ready to give up the ghost. I think she's still a level above the competition here in Natalia Silva, even though Natalia Silva has a good game, southpaw, decent takedowns, but honestly not the takedowns you would expect from, a top level, somebody fighting a women's MMA fighter at the level of Rose Namajunas here in the UFC. She is more of a striker, so I think Rose is going to have no problem committing to the takedowns here. It's the women's MMA classic. When in doubt, take the fight to the ground. And Thug Rose is a veteran and she's going to do her job. I think that she could dominate the first couple fights on the round and then dominate the third round on the feet once Silva's tired, prove her superior striking. I think that Rose is not old enough at this point to be anywhere near washed up, and I think we could actually be at a point where she's improving a lot of her skills, and I think we've seen that in some of her recent performances. So I'm picking Rose Namajunas over Natalia Silva in this fight. So yeah, to summarize all my picks, I didn't pick this fight, but I'll pick the undefeated Ty Miller over Adam Fugit in the first fight here at welterweight. In the second fight, we had Josh Hokit over Denzel Freeman. In this fight, we have Alexander Hernandez over Michael Johnson. I picked Charles Johnson over Alex Perez. This is the one that I'm probably the least sure about on the entire card. Bukauskas over Krylov, also a close fight. I just think I'm not going to pick a guy who's been slept twice in a row. Gautier versus Pulyaev. Gautier is, a future champion contender in my eyes. Nurmagomedov versus Figueiredo. Figueiredo missed weight. Umar. He's only lost to Merab. This is a pretty quiet. This is a relatively quiet comeback fight and a pretty easy win for Umar, in my opinion. Arnold Allen versus Gene Silva. Like I said, lots of physical advantages for Arnold Allen and a stronger level of competition throughout the career. And I think the demise of Thug Rose has been widely exaggerated. I expect her to take care of Natalia Silva. I think Acosta is going to knock out Derek Lewis in all likelihood, although, again, you always have to give that Derek Lewis caveat. I'm picking Sean O'Malley unless, something really significantly went wrong in the O'Malley camp in the lead up to the fight. And in Gaethje versus Paddy Pimblett, I cannot pick it. I'm giving it 55-45 for Gaethje, but I will not personally make a selection, even though I think it is a great fight for both fighters and an extremely level determining for Paddy Pimblett, who I think could definitely win this fight with his explosiveness and his longer reach. So that's going to do it. Please subscribe to NPC Fights, my brand new fight channel. There's going to be a ton of fighting content, ton of combat sports, ton of boxing content on the channel, like there has been on my past NPC channel, which if you're not subscribed to that channel and you like especially baseball, but I also cover gaming on that channel, and I also cover a little soccer on that channel, weirdly. I think that my videos for big fights may stay on that channel in the future. It really depends. But for all that fight content, but for the fight content every week, for the weekly, the daily uploads, the live stream about fighting, stay right here at NPC Fights. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more combat sports content. I'll be right back, probably on Sunday, with a review of all the action from UFC 324, and we can see just how wrong I was about every single fight that I picked today.